So with anything in life, people make mistakes. Some could be minor and some could be leaving hundreds if not thousands of dollars on the table. And one area a lot of people make mistakes in is with their spending, specifically with credit cards, and it's not just your basic good credit card habits. Whether you're an expert or a beginner, I'm sure that you have or will make one of these mistakes on the list today. And so starting with mistake number 1 is that credit cards are not always free. Now I know that might sound weird given there's tons of cards out there that have no annual fees, but I'm more talking about cards out there that have several credits, like the $300 travel credit on the Chase Sapphire Reserve or $120 of Uber and dining credit on the Amex Gold. Sometimes you get so entrenched into these cards that you might forget you're paying annual fees to get these credits in the first place, and that it's only worth it if you get more value out of all of those credits compared to the annual fee that you pay. And when it comes to no annual fee cards, you want to make sure you're using the right cards too. For example, a great benchmark for a card that has good value is the Citi Double Cash card, where no matter how much you spend and where you spend it, you'll essentially get a 2% cashback, meaning any card that's giving you less than that, maybe 1% or nothing at all, is in a way costing you money given the opportunity cost. Spend $1,000 and get nothing back versus spending it on the double cash and essentially get a free $20, especially since the card has no annual fee anyways. Basically, you want to make sure that the cards you have are there for a reason and fits with your lifestyle and spending habits, and not just because someone on the internet said that they were good cards. But at the same time, you want to avoid overcomplicating your setup, which can lead to a ton of different issues. Now, I might have a biased audience, but most people aren't going about their day thinking about credit cards, which card to use for the best multipliers, or which cards still have credits you need to use before the month ends. And if you're that type of person and you're watching this video, there's this middle danger zone you want to avoid, where you might be getting all of these cards being swayed by the luxurious experiences you can have, yet you don't have the time or maybe interest to put in the work day to day to learn how to get the most out of your points and rewards, or just making sure you're coming out positive with all of these cards. Again, make sure the cards you get are right for your specific use case. With companies getting smarter nowadays and spreading their credits throughout the year, like the $25 per month dining credit on the Marriott Bonvoy Brilliant card, or the $10 a month dining credit on the Amex Gold, you really have to be on top of things to make sure you're getting all of that value. Which goes back to mistake number 1 and assuming all these credits are free. For example, I've pretty much been missing out on the $50 yearly hotel credit that comes with my Sapphire Preferred. Meaning all the talk about how the $50 hotel credit can bring your annual fee from $95 to an effective $45 is pretty much irrelevant. It's just that I personally value all the other things about the card, like transfer partners, enough to keep the card around. Then having a complicated setup also makes it difficult to remember which card to use where. If you have the Chase trifecta, will you remember to use the Freedom Flex on the rotating categories every quarter? What about keeping that spend under $1,500 every quarter? Will you then remember to put your travel purchases on your Sapphire Preferred and everything else on the Unlimited? And that's only with 3 cards. Double or triple that and things can get really confusing. In this day and age where even Gen Zs are cutting back on high-end phones and going back to more dumb phones, it shows that people just want less stress and fewer things in their life, not more. Which is probably why setups like the Capital One Duo has been gaining so much popularity recently. Because with just 2 cards, you cover a lot of bases, from your regular spending up to more luxurious travel experiences. And with some simple credits like $300 to the Capital One travel portal and $100 worth of points every year. Personally, I think after 1 or 2 more cards, probably the Amex Gold, because it gives me 4 times on groceries and dining, which are 2 major spend categories. I'll probably slow down my card applications again so it's less to keep track of or things to keep in mind. Apart from being complicated because of all the credits or the different multipliers on all of your cards, another thing to keep in mind is that all your different cards have different protections too. And it's not as simple as, oh, the more expensive the card, it must have the better protections. What if the Amex Plaid is giving you bonus points to rent cars? How do you balance that with getting fewer points but on the cheaper Chase Sapphire Preferred, knowing that you'll get primary car rental insurance instead of secondary like on the Platinum, which will save you $20 to $30 every rental day? Or did you even know that these type of perks existed on these cards? What about which cards have the best travel protections, like the United Club Infinite giving you trip delay reimbursement after 12 hours, where the Chase Sapphire Reserve gives it to you after 6 hours? Or how the Reserve gives you return protection of up to $500 an item versus $300 on the Amex Plaid, even though the process is a bit easier on the Platinum. Having so many options isn't really a bad thing, but having too many cards can overcomplicate even the simplest of decisions. So really be deliberate about which cards you get and know the ins and outs of when to use which card. But speaking of all of these amazing cards, mistake number 3 is jumping into higher end luxury cards too early. I mean, if you're getting your first card with a part-time job and no credit history, you probably won't be approved for a card like the Sapphire Reserve or the Venture X. And you'll suffer from a hard pull dinging your credit report even more. Even if you do qualify and get approved, it may not be the best move for a variety of reasons. 1. Annual fees can hurt. Yes, there are different credits and ways to get value out of the card, but you have to be able to naturally use those credits. Meaning there's no point going out of your way to order on Uber Eats in order to use the credits on Amex Gold if you usually just cook at home. You never want to stretch yourself to spend on things you wouldn't have spent on in the first place. And on that note, reason number 2 is if you're unable to hit the minimum spend, which can be thousands of dollars like on the Amex Platinum, then there's absolutely no reason for you to apply for this card, because such a major part of the value you get from credit cards is from this welcome bonus. So if you can't, again, naturally hit this spend, just don't go for the card. Third, it might not be good for your credit score in the long run if your first few cards are some high annual fee cards, because a significant chunk of your credit score is from the length of your credit history. So if the oldest cards are the ones you might cancel in the future, especially if they have high annual fees, you really don't want to lose that credit history. That's all to say that you should work your way up the credit card ladder in line with your own personal growth. From maybe a part-timer to your first job out of college to raises, promotions, and more. Only get cards that fit the lifestyle that you currently have, because you don't want to stretch yourself too thin and make mistake number 4, which is developing bad credit card habits. Now, I'll keep this section quick because it should be ingrained in your mind by now, but it's a really important section to have nailed down. But basically, TLDR, always pay your bill in full and on time every single month. This will impact a whopping 35% of your credit score. Forget about the minimum payments, never carry a balance so you won't pay a cent in interest and fees. Keep your utilization under 30% and ideally under 10 but more than 0. This shows that you're good with the current amount of credit you have and aren't a dangerous borrower. This affects 30% of your credit score. And a tip, if you're making any major purchases, pay it off right away so it won't show on your credit report when companies send it to the different credit bureaus. And keep old cards open to keep that length of credit history as well as the average, which affects 15% of your credit score. The last 20% or so involves your credit mix and new credit, but isn't really worth the effort to focus on. Do all that and you'll slowly build your credit to the mid to high 700s or even 800 plus, and you'll not only get pretty easy approvals for most credit cards, but also get the best rates to save thousands of dollars on your mortgages and auto loans. And speaking of the length of credit history, mistake number 5 that a lot of people make is forgetting to use your credit cards. Maybe you have a years old credit card in the drawer that never crossed your mind again, or you have 30 different credit cards and it's hard to keep track of. Again, overcomplication. you'll want to make sure that all of the cards you mean to keep open will stay open. Because after a while of no activity, the banks will eventually close your account and then have a significant impact on your credit score, especially with lowering the total amount of credit you have, as well as dropping your length of credit history, or the average. Don't be like me, where I forgot to use my very first credit card, the Bank of America Travel Rewards card, back in 2015, which had a pretty direct impact on my credit score. Instead, two things you can do to automate this process is 1, have some type of reoccurring payment on these cards, even if it's like $1 or $5 reloading your Starbucks or Amazon accounts. And 2, set up automatic payment so it'll always be paid in full and on time without you having to worry about it. That way, all of these cards will stay open forever without you having to constantly check on them. Just make sure these aren't cards that have major annual fees that you aren't using. In those cases, either consider a product change if possible, like what I did with the Chase Sapphire Preferred down to the regular Chase Freedom, or just cancel the card if you really have to. Alright, mistake number 6 that you'll want to avoid is getting too specific or tunneling into a certain ecosystem. Now, what do I mean here? Well, with credit card points, there are 2 kinds. Flexible ones like Chase Ultimate Rewards or Amex Membership Reward Points, which can be used within their own ecosystem, their travel portals, Amazon, or a few other ways, as well as transferring to a ton of different partners at favorable rates, which is where all the outsized value tends to come from. And then there are more specific points that you'll usually want to keep within the single ecosystem, like a card that earns you United or Delta miles, or Marriott and Hilton points. That's not to say that you can't transfer these points out elsewhere, but usually you'll want to be using these points within the specific ecosystems for max value. In my opinion, I think flexible points are the best because they give you the widest variety of redemptions at decent to great value. Take Chase points for example. You can redeem them for 1 cent per point for cashback, up to 1.5 cents per point through their portal if you have the Sapphire Reserve, or usually upwards of 2 cents or more when transferring to one of their amazing travel partners. In fact, I'm about to head out on a trip that I booked with exactly that method, transferring my points over to Aeroplan to book 2 EVA business class tickets to Taiwan and Japan, valuing my points at just over 5 cents per point. But when it comes to the more specific points, not only are you locked to that specific ecosystem, usually within the airline or the hotel chain, you're also more susceptible to having your points devalued given changes to those specific programs. Like Marriott devaluing their points and moving to a dynamic pricing model last year, Alaska devaluing their Japan Airlines redemptions, or United just the other day increasing award costs by over 30%. Now with that said, these specific programs do have their time and place. Usually if you're a loyalist to that brand, or if you have upcoming plans and you're sure you can use all of the different benefits that the card provides, like free night awards or hotel upgrades that you can learn more about up in the corner. Or if you've already gone through all of the flexible point cards and you're in your end game trying to squeeze out all the value you can get, then maybe you want to consider these more specific cards. But in general, for most people, flexible cards are where it's at. Now, no matter which cards you get, you'll want to make sure you're not making mistake number 7, which is not understanding the different credit card rules, which aren't usually widely advertised unless you go searching for them. A famous one is actually 524, which says that you won't be approved for new Chase cards if you've had more than 5 new cards of any issuer in the last 24 months, or the 24 or 48 month rule on the Freedom or Sapphire cards, which says that you won't qualify for the welcome bonuses on each of the Freedom cards or any of the Sapphire cards if you've had one of their bonuses in the last 24 or 48 months respectively. And with Chase cards being so valuable, that's one of the big reasons why I'd recommend going for Chase cards first before looking too deeply into other cards. Whereas in contrast, there's American Express's once in a lifetime rule, where you'll usually only qualify for a card's welcome bonus once in your lifetime, which is why you probably should wait for at or near all-time high offers on these cards before applying for them, usually slotting them in whenever they come up. Applying for too many cards cards in a short amount of time can be a red flag too. Not only will each card substantially dip your credit score over a period of time, but purely the velocity of you opening so many new cards in that time can raise a flag too. Usually 1 or 2 months between cards is okay, but personally I usually recommend between 3 to 6 months instead. There's lots of different rules you should know before you apply for different cards, like one Capital One card every 6 months, or some city rules that seem to be a bit vague nowadays. Now, if you've gotten to this point of the video, here are several important rapid fire mistakes or tips that you want to keep in mind. Check for pre-qualified offers, whether on cardmatch.com or certain banks' own pre-approval sites, or check beforehand if you'll be approved for a card without suffering from the hard pull, which exists on plenty of cards nowadays and can save you a ding on your credit score in case you would have gotten denied. Next, don't forget to look at the slightly more hidden offers on your cards, like Chase, American Express, and Capital One offers that each can give you anywhere from a few dollars up to hundreds of dollars back on some very common stores. There's also more hidden offers like getting Amazon discounts when you're redeeming points from certain ecosystems, which can be pretty lucrative. And again, never stretch out of your means to hit certain minimum spends or use credits. You should instead use tips like pay for your friend group and have them Venmo you back, or only apply for certain cards if you know you have big purchases coming up like electronics or your insurance payments. And always practice good credit card habits. And since you love credit cards, go on and check out this video that YouTube thinks you'll enjoy. See you over there.